Hello friends, welcome to my video. This is part 4 of our discussion on the provisions of customs law in India. If you want to access the part 1, part 2 and part 3 of our discussion, kindly visit the link that is provided in the information tab on the top right corner of your screen. Okay, let us come back to our video. So in this video I will be discussing on the provisions relating to procedures that are to be followed when the goods are imported or exported to or from India. Basically it is called as import and export procedures that are to be followed by the person who are importing goods into India or exporting goods out of India. So what are all the provisions relating to those process that will be discussed in this video. So as I told you, import and export procedures, in that first we will be discussing the import procedures provisions, and then we will get on to the export procedures provision in this video. So in case of imports, these are all the steps that would be taken or carried on by any person who is importing any goods into India. The first step would be the goods that are getting imported, it has to arrive at the customs port in India. It has to arrive through, either it has to come through sea route or it has to come through air route, or it can even come through land route. So these are all the three possible routes for any goods to enter into India. So in whatever the mode the goods are transported into India, it has to reach to the customs port. So the goods have to first arrive at the customs port, that is step number 1. Step number 2 is once the goods have been arrived, then the person who is in charge of the conveyance, he has to submit a report that is called as import manifest, or it can even be called as import report. So about import manifest and import report we have already discussed in part 1 of our video. Then the third step would be the goods have to be unloaded into the customs station. From the conveyance or from the vehicle, the goods have to get unloaded. That is step number 3 when the goods are imported. So step number 4 is once the goods have got unloaded from the vehicle, it has to be subjected to the assessment by the officer. The proper officer of customs will come and scrutinize the goods. They will verify whether the goods that are mentioned in the import documents and the quantity, quality, type of the goods, everything are as similar to the physical status of the goods as well. That assessment would be done by the authority. So those assessments can happen only after the importer submits the bill of entry. So we already discussed in our part 1 of the video when the bill of entry has to be submitted by the importer. Okay, so the step 4 is submission of bill of entry. So step 5 is the goods shall be assessed by the customs officer. Once the goods are assessed, then the goods can be cleared for home consumption. The customs officer may clear the goods for home consumption, or if the importer wants to warehouse those goods, if the goods he intends to warehouse it, then the officer will clear it for warehousing. So either the goods have to be moved into the area, into the free area of India. Otherwise the goods can be kept in the warehouse, customs bonded warehouse. We will be discussing the procedures for home clearance as well as procedure for warehousing in our video. Then out of charge order will be issued by the customs authorities. Out of charge means it means that the goods are removed from the responsibility of the customs authorities. No more the goods are under the control of the customs authority. It has been removed, it has been given as out of charge. That is what the final step when the goods are imported into India. So once the goods are imported, the importer is eligible to claim input tax credit on those goods that are imported. So input tax credit can be claimed. So what are all the duties or taxes the input tax credit is available, that will be discussed now. So ITC, input tax credit on the basic customs duty, what we refer it as BCD. If we refer BCD, it will include SWS as well, social welfare surcharge, that also will include on the BCD. We already discussed that. So on BCD as well as SWS, the importer is not eligible for input tax credit. It is a cost for the importer. ITC cannot be claimed on those duties. Then the importer will also pay some additional duty or taxes that would be called as IGST. We have already discussed on those, all those aspects, what are all the duties that would be levied on inputs. All those things have been discussed in our earlier videos, so you can refer for the detailed discussion. So the importer can claim ITC, that is input tax credit, on the IGST portion of the duties. IGST and the GST cess as well. The GST compensation cess is also eligible to be claimed as input tax credit by the importer. But in order to claim the input tax credit, the importer has to satisfy the following conditions. What are all those conditions? GSTN is to be provided in the bill of entry. GSTN means GST number has to be provided in the bill of entry. Second is, if the importer is in the process of registration. For example, GSTN will be provided for any person who has already got registered in GST law. But if the importer is in the process of registering himself, then he can mention a provisional GST number. A provisional GST number will be allotted to the importer. He can mention the provisional GST number in the bill of entry. But when the bill of entry is finally submitted to the customs authorities, that time the final GST number has to be provided to them in order to claim the input tax credit on the IGST paid on imports. Then after all these are done, the amount paid, the IGST paid on imports, that has to get reflected in GSTR 2A. The customs authorities will intimate to the GST officer, that is to the GST officers, on whatever the taxes they have claimed or they have collected upon imports. That would be intimated to them. Based on the intimation received from the customs authorities, it would be properly reflected in the GSTR 2A of the respective registered person. In our case, it will be importer. So once the amount is reflected in GSTR 2A, the importer is eligible to claim input tax credit on the said imports. The EDI system is the system maintained by the electronic data interchange system. That is what the EDI system. So that EDI system maintained by the customs authorities, that would be integrated with the GST network, GSTN, and because of this integration, the IGST paid on imports, that would get validated by the GST authorities as well, in order to provide the seamless credit on the IGST paid on imports. Okay, next we will discuss about the payment of taxes in case of imports. When the bill of entry on imports is submitted, so the following types of bill of entries would be submitted by the importer for different purposes. So the first type of bill of entry is that would be called as white color bill of entry. The document itself would be in white in color. So white color bill of entry would be submitted by the importer if the goods are cleared for home consumption. Clear or not? If the goods are cleared for home consumption, then a white color bill of entry would be submitted. And when the white color bill of entry is submitted, the duty on the imports has to be paid on the same day. It has to be paid on the same day. If it is paid on the same day, then there will not be any interest levied on that. If the duty is not paid on the same day, on which day? On the day when the bill of entry, white color bill of entry is submitted. If it is not paid on the same day, then interest under section 47 subsection 2 will be levied on the duty because of the delay in payment of duty. Second type of bill of entry is called as yellow color bill of entry. Yellow color bill of entry will be generally submitted when the goods are warehoused. If the goods are not cleared immediately for home consumption, but the goods are kept in warehouse, then a yellow color bill of entry will be submitted. Once the yellow color bill of entry is submitted, then the authorities provide 90 days time period to clear the goods from warehouse. Up to 90 days, there will not be any interest charged on it. Within 90 days, the importer has to file a green color bill of entry. Green color bill of entry will be filed for clearing the goods from warehouse, and it will be taken for the domestic tariff area, that is to the normal land area of India. So if the green color bill of entry is not filed within 90 days from the date of filing of yellow color bill of entry, then an interest will be charged from 91st day. From 91st day, interest under section 47 subsection 2, the same interest that would be charged from 91st day if the goods are warehoused. Clear? This is what the provisions relating to payment of taxes, when the taxes has to be paid. If the goods are cleared for home consumption, then the relevant provision for that is section 47. Section 47 speaks about the goods that are cleared for home consumption. When the goods are imported, and if the goods are not considered as prohibited goods, if the goods are considered as prohibited goods, then the goods will not be cleared for home consumption at all. If the goods are not considered as prohibited goods, and if the duty on the goods are duly paid, then the authorities may clear the goods for home consumption. It means what, the goods can be taken out from the customs station and it can be used freely in India, because all the duties on those goods are already paid. So the two conditions are what? One, the good should not be a prohibited goods. Second one is the duty on the imports has to be duly paid. If these two have happened, then the authorities will clear the goods for home consumption. Then if the duty payment can be deferred by certain persons, very few persons can defer payment of the duty when the goods are cleared for home consumption. Who are all those persons? Those persons will be notified by Government of India. If Government of India has notified a certain category of persons that those persons can defer payment of duty. Defer means they can prolong it. They need not pay the duty immediately. They can take some more time, some additional time will be provided to them, and the duty can be paid on a later date. That is called as deferment of duty. Deferment of duty provisions are applicable only to certain persons who are notified by Government of India. If the duty is not paid, as we discussed before, under subsection 2 of section 47, the importer is liable to pay interest. Interest is notified at the rate of 15% per annum. 15% per annum of interest is payable if the goods are if the duty is not paid on the same day when the bill of entry is submitted for the purpose of clearance for home consumption. Clear? So if the bill of entry is submitted on self-assessment basis, for example, if the importer himself assesses the duty, and based on his self-assessment, if he is submitting the bill of entry, and whatever the duty that is mentioned in the bill of entry, that has to be paid on the same day. It means what? Self-assessment bill of entry has to be paid on the same day. If the bill of entry is based on some provisional assessment, or if the authorities are doing some reassessment on the bill of entry. Reassessment means I have done a self-assessment, but the authorities wants to do a reassessment on the bill of entry. They wants to assess themselves. That is called as reassessment. If in those two cases, then the duty on the bill of entry has to be paid within 1 day from the date the bill of entry is returned to the importer. We have to be very clear in understanding this. Two categories. First category is when the bill of entry is submitted on self-assessment basis. If I myself has assessed the bill of entry and assessed the duty as well, when I submit the bill of entry, within the same day I will have to pay the duty as well. That is scenario number 1. Scenario number 2 is if the goods are cleared on provisional assessment basis. For example, I have not assessed the bill of entry, but I have left the assessment to the authorities itself. And the authority on provisional basis they are assessing or they are assessing as a reassessment. In those two cases, the bill of entry will be assessed and it will be returned back to the importer by the authorities. If it is returned back within 1 day from the date of returning of the bill of entry, the the importer has to pay the duty that is mentioned in the bill of entry. Clear or not? So in first case it is to be paid on the same day. Second case it has to be paid within 1 day from the date of receipt of bill of entry. This is what provided under section 47. And the section also says that CBEC or CBIC, now it is called as CBIC. So CBIC is empowered to waive off whole or any part of interest that is payable on the delayed payment of duty. See, if CBIC or CBIC, that is the Central Board of Indirect Tax and Customs, if the board considers that the delay is due to some legible reasons, then they may issue an order to waive off either whole of the interest or any part of the interest, and if the order is received by the importer, then he need not pay that interest amount if there is any delay in payment of duty. Okay, when we discuss this, there is one case law under these provisions. This case law was between Commissioner of Customs versus Shriji Overseas India Private Limited. This case law was decided in the year 2013, and the decision was provided by Honorable High Court of Gujarat. What was the, let us understand the facts of this case. The fact of the case is, under section 48, there is a 30 days time limit provided to the importer. What does section 48 says? If once the goods are imported and it is unloaded into the customs station, then the section 48 provides 30 days time limit for the importer to submit bill of entry. Not submit, it is for clearing to the clearing for the home consumption. So the clearance for home consumption can be done only by submitting a bill of entry. But this section 48 speaks about 30 days time limit is provided to the importer for clearing the goods for home consumption. But section 46 speaks about the submission of bill of entry. Whether here the assessee is claiming that the 30 days time period provided under section 48 for clearing the goods, whether that 30 days can be extended for submitting the bill of entry as well. See, we already discussed that the steps for clearance of goods when the import has happened, the steps goes like this. The bill of entry has to be submitted, the goods has to be unloaded. After the goods are unloaded, the next step we discussed is the bill of entry has to be submitted by the importer. Then the goods will be subjected to assessment by the authorities. After the assessment is over, then the duty has to be paid on that. Once the duty is paid, then they will pass an order for home clearance. This is what the steps we understood. Here section 48 comes after 46. Section 46. What does section 48 say? For clearance for home consumption, a 30 days time period is provided to the importer. But section 46 comes before that. It is a step that has to be taken before that. Here this assessee, they are claiming that I can take the 30 days time period even for submitting the bill of entry, because these two are different events. One is submitting bill of entry, second one is clearance for home consumption. Whether the submission of bill of entry can also be done after 30 days from the date of import. That is what the assessee here claims. For that, the decision of Gujarat High Court states that the time limit is not at all prescribed under section 46. If you read the section 46, there is no time limit provided for submission of bill of entry. But under section 48, they have clearly stated about the 30 days time limit provided for clearing the goods for home consumption. So the court has clearly stated that the time limit provided under section 48 cannot be taken under section 46. It means what? Even that 30 days time period and all is not applicable, since they have not provided any time limit under section 46. The importer can submit bill of entry at any time. See, the decision ultimately reads like this. I have imported the goods today, the goods have been unloaded today. Okay, I can submit bill of entry after any number of days. Okay, because there is no time limit under section 46. But once the bill of entry is submitted, then only the next step comes to play here. What is the next step? Clearing it for home consumption. For that, only section 48 speaks about 30 days time limit. So I will submit bill of entry whenever I want to After submitting the bill of entry, the authorities will clear it for home consumption. Once they pass the order for clearance for home consumption, then it is 30 days time period is provided for me to actually remove the goods from the custom station. Okay, so this is what provided by this case law. After this case law has come, the department has come up with an amendment. There was an amendment in section 46. This amendment has come in Finance Act 2017. What does this amendment say? This amendment states that this amendment is mainly on submission of bill of entry. This states that bill of entry has to be presented before end of day of next day. End of day of next day means what? The goods have entered into the customs port today and it has been unloaded. The time limit for submitting the bill of entry is within 1 day, that is end of the day of next day when the goods have been reached to the customs port. That is what amended by the authorities through Finance Act 2017. From the day of arrival of goods, within 1 day, that is end of the next day of arrival of goods, the bill of entry has to be submitted. There is a proviso inserted here. This proviso says that bill of entry to be submitted it can be submitted up to 30 days in advance in case the goods are shipped through vessel or aircraft. We have already discussed in detail when we discussed in part 1 of the video. In our introduction part of discussion, I have already discussed in detail that when the bill of entry has to be submitted in case of import of goods. In case of import of goods that are imported through vessel or aircraft, that means sea route or through air route, then the bill of entry has to be submitted in advance. It means what? Before the arrival of goods, the bill of entry has to be submitted. But if the goods are arriving through land route, it is arriving through some vehicle, then the bill of entry can be submitted. Because of this amendment, the bill of entry can be submitted within 1 day. 1 day time period is provided. Clear? Then the section also states that the proper officer has the authority to extend the time limit. The time limit for submission of bill of entry can be extended by the proper officer provided any sufficient explanation is provided by the importer. If there is any sufficient cause for the delay in submission of bill of entry, then the proper officer has the authority to condone the delay. They can extend the time period. By this amendment, the case law just now we discussed, in case of Sriji Overseas India Private Limited case law, that case law has been nullified because the case law states that there is no time limit provided in section 46. By way of this amendment, a time limit is being inserted. So this case law is no more valid and it is being nullified by the authorities by way of an amendment in Finance Act 2017. Okay, so these are all the provisions relating to clearance of goods for home consumption. That is option number 1 when the goods are imported. Option number 2 the importer has is, instead of clearing it immediately for home consumption, he can choose to warehouse those goods. Okay, the goods can be kept in a warehouse, and after some days, after some point of time, we will discuss about the time limit when how long the goods can be warehoused. After the time limit is over, or within that time, the goods can be any day cleared for home consumption. This is option number 2 when the goods are imported into India. Okay, before that we will understand about what is a warehouse. Warehouse is defined under section 2 clause 43. What does that say? It says that a warehouse can be a public warehouse which is licensed under section 57, or it can be a private warehouse which is licensed under section 58, or it can even be a special warehouse which is licensed under section 58 capital A. So these are all 3 types of warehouse. One is called as public warehouse, second one is private warehouse, third one is called as a special warehouse. This is defined in case of warehouse under section 2 clause 43 of Customs Act 1962. Then we will discuss about the features of warehousing. What are all the features if the goods are warehoused? First one is the duty that has to be paid when the goods are imported. That duty payment can be deferred. I told you, if the goods are warehoused, then the duty need not be paid immediately. The duty can be paid when the goods are cleared from warehouse. When the goods are cleared from warehouse, that time the duty can be paid. So it means ultimately the duty can be deferred, the payment of duty can be deferred. That is feature number 1. Next is, if the goods are warehoused, then it is allowed by the authorities to do some manufacture even inside the warehouse itself. Inside the warehouse itself, the importer can do some manufacture, then straight from warehouse, those manufactured goods can be re-exported again. Here see, the importer has imported certain goods, and those certain goods are subject to some manufacture in India, and the goods has to be re-exported again. That is what the purpose here. So in that case, the goods that are warehoused, the manufacturing activity can happen inside the warehouse itself, and from there the goods can be re-exported back. By doing this, the importer can save certain procedures. For example, the importer need not unnecessarily clear it for home consumption, submit the bill of entry, pay the duty, clear it for home consumption, then do the manufacture outside the premises. Again, it has to undergo all those procedures for export, for the goods to get exported. This is like a shortcut route where the goods can be directly taken to the warehouse, bonded warehouse. Inside the warehouse itself, he can undertake the manufacture, and from there it can be directly exported. Clear or not? So here he can bypass all those procedures for clearing it for the home consumption as well as re-exporting it back. Next one is, the goods that are warehoused, it can be kept for a period of 1 year. Up to 1 year the goods can be warehoused. But in case the assessee, the person who is warehousing the goods, if he is an EOU, it means what? EOU means export oriented unit. It is a separate type of unit. If the assessee is an export oriented unit, then he can warehouse the goods up to 3 years. 1 year can be read as 3 years. And if the goods are in the nature of capital goods, then the warehousing period will be extended up to 5 years. So there are 3 time periods. Until then the goods can be kept in the warehouse. Next one is, even though if the goods are warehoused, there has to be some charges to be paid on that. See, nothing comes for free in our world. So if the goods are kept in a warehouse, it means that the importer is availing the services of the warehouse keeper. For that, the godown rent or warehouse rent has to be paid by the importer. Second one is, we will also be discussing about interest also has to be paid on that. That we will discuss in the upcoming slide, when the interest has to be paid. So if you take all these charges together, these charges are considered to be lesser than the goods are kept in the custom station itself. I told you there is a 30 days time limit provided for clearing the goods. Until then the goods can be kept in the custom station itself. If the goods are kept in the custom station itself, then they will not keep it for free. They will charge some amount that is called as demurrage charges. Demurrage charges is something that would be charged by the customs authorities if the goods are not cleared and kept in the customs station itself. Instead, the goods can be cleared for warehousing and it can be kept there, and whatever the charges the importer will be paying, that would be considered as lesser than the demurrage charges. Next one is, the AC or DC, that is Assistant Commissioner or Deputy Commissioner, is empowered to provide license to any warehouse as a public warehouse or private warehouse. For example, if there are any warehouse, the AC or DC can provide license to be called as the customs warehouse. That power is provided to Assistant Commissioner or a Deputy Commissioner. And only the goods that are dutiable, that means any duty can be charged on that. Any exempted goods cannot be warehoused, it has to be cleared immediately for home consumption. Only dutiable goods that can be kept in the warehouse. Clear or not? Only dutiable goods are allowed to be deposited into the warehouse. As we discussed already, a bill of entry, that is called as in-bond bill of entry. See, all these terms are very important for you to remember. This is called as in-bond bill of entry. That can also be called as yellow color bill of entry. Yellow bill of entry has to be submitted if the goods are taken to warehouse. If the goods are to be deposited into warehouse, yellow color bill of entry has to be submitted. And when the goods are to be cleared from warehouse, that time another bill of entry has to be submitted. That is called as ex-bond bill of entry or sub bill of entry. That bill of entry will be also be called as green color bill of entry. Okay, these two bill of entries has to be submitted. If the goods are immediately upright cleared for home consumption, then the bill of entry which the importer has to file is called as white color bill of entry. Clear? There are three types of bill of entry which we have already discussed in our previous slides. Okay, then the rate of duty that we have to consider is on the date when the goods are actually cleared from the warehouse. This part also we have already discussed in detail in our part 1 of the video. So the rate of duty has to be considered on the date when the goods are cleared from the warehouse and not on the date when the goods are deposited into the warehouse. Okay, that is one point here. Next one is, once the goods are warehoused, before warehousing those goods, the authorities will do one assessment. One time of assessment would have already been done by the authorities when the goods are going to be deposited into the warehouse. Again, when the goods are cleared from the warehouse, that time the authorities cannot do the assessment. Reassessment of those goods are not allowed if the goods are warehoused. Next is exchange rate. On exchange rate, on which date we have to consider is, we have to consider the exchange rate on the date when the goods are deposited into the warehouse. Here we are seeing two dates. One is if the goods are deposited into the warehouse, and when the goods are cleared, that time what is the rate of duty, that should be considered in case of rate of duty. But in case of exchange rate, we need to consider when the goods are deposited into the warehouse. To say it simply, I will tell you that the date when the yellow color bill of entry is filed, on that date whatever is the exchange rate available, that exchange rate has to be considered. But in case of determining the rate of duty, we need to consider the date when the green color bill of entry is filed. Are we clear? So these are all the two dates which we need to be very careful. Next one is, if the goods are not cleared within the time stipulated. I already told you that 1 year in case of normal goods, 3 years if the assessee is export oriented unit, and 5 years if the goods are capital goods. Okay, these are all the three time limits provided. If the goods are not cleared within these time limits, then after that if the goods are cleared, that is called as improper clearance. If we come across any term called improper clearance, that means what? If the goods are cleared after the time period that is allowed by the act for warehousing those goods. In case of improper clearance, then the rate of duty you need to consider is not on the date when the goods are actually cleared. Here we need to consider different date. What is that date? The date is the last date allowed by the authorities to warehouse those goods. What is the last date? In case if it is a normal goods and the assessee is also a normal importer, then the time period allowed is 1 year. We have already discussed. The last day of that 1 year is called as the last day the goods has to be actually cleared. If the goods are not cleared on that date, if the goods are cleared later than that date, then that is called as improper clearance. In case of improper clearance, then the relevant date for determining the rate of duty is the last date of that 1 year, last day of that 1 year. This is provided by the decision of court in case of Kesoram Rayon, Assessee versus Commissioner of Customs. This case law was provided in the year 1996. Okay, this stand was taken by the court decision. Okay, so we discussed about the provisions relating to warehousing. Now let us discuss about the provisions relating to special warehousing. So we will have to understand about what is called as a special warehouse and how the licensing of the special warehouse can happen. So we already discussed the special warehouse licensing can be provided under section 58 capital A. Section 58 capital A and subsection 1 speaks about the principal commissioner or a commissioner is empowered to license a special warehouse. We already discussed that AC or DC is empowered to license any warehouse as a public warehouse or a private warehouse. But in case of a special warehouse, the authority who can provide the license is principal commissioner or a commissioner. Here AC or DC are not at all having any power to license a special warehouse. and only the, as usual, only the dutiable goods that can be deposited into the special warehouse. Once the goods are deposited into the warehouse, it will be locked, it will be completely locked, and no person is allowed inside, or the removal of goods and all is not at all possible. It will be completely locked, and the key will be with the officer only, with the customs officer only. No person is allowed to get into that warehouse. That is in case of special warehouse. Then subsection 2 speaks about what are all the nature of goods that can be kept in the special warehouse. So subsection 2 states that the goods that are notified by the government, those are all the type of goods that has to be kept in the special warehouse. In this scenario, there is a notification issued, notification number 66/2016. It was issued on 14th May 2016. What does this notification say? This notification provides the types of goods or class of goods that has to be warehoused in a special warehouse. What are all those goods? One is any gold, any silver, or any other precious materials, any precious metals or semi-precious metals as well. So these are all the goods that has to be kept in a special warehouse only. And the goods that are warehoused for the purpose of supply to any duty-free shops. When if at all you have been to any country outside India, and if you have come back from any country outside India, you would have noticed that some shops will be available before you cross the customs station. That shops are called as duty-free shops. So if the goods are to be warehoused, that will be supplied in the duty-free shops. For that purpose, if the goods are getting warehoused, then it will be deposited into a special warehouse only. Okay, and if the goods are to be used as a supplies to any aircraft or any vessels, I told you that any spares or any stores that would be utilized in case of a vessels or aircraft, those goods can also be warehoused in a special warehouse. And if any supply to any foreign privileged persons, there are certain persons called foreign privileged persons, and in terms of foreign privileged persons, regulation of customs privileges rules 1957, there is a separate rules. In terms of those rules, if the goods are going to be supplied, then those goods also can be deposited into a special warehouse. These are all the provisions relating to special warehouse. Now let us discuss about the period the goods can be warehoused. What is the time period the goods can be warehoused, which we have already discussed. Let us discuss in detail now. Section 61 of the Customs Act 1962 speaks about the period until when the goods can be warehoused. The first type of goods is any capital goods that is for the usage of 100% EOU or EHTP. EHTP is nothing but Electronic Hardware Technology Park. So that is EHTP. Next one is STP. STP is Software Technology Park. So if these persons are imported any capital goods, then the goods can be deposited until the clearance from the warehouse. It means what? Until when the goods they want to keep in the warehouse, they can keep it. There is no time period at all. That is first type of goods. Second type of goods is other than capital goods but by the same persons. The persons are called as 100% EOU, EHTP, STP. If these persons have imported certain goods which are not capital goods, in those cases also till the consumption or clearance from the warehouse, they can keep the goods inside the warehouse until when they want to keep it. It is at their discretion. It can be kept in the warehouse. There is no time limit at all. In case of any other goods, if the goods are not falling within these categories, then it can be kept until the expiry of 1 year from the date of order by the proper officer. Order means what? Order for warehousing those goods. From that date until 1 year, the goods can be kept inside the warehouse. This is what the provisions under section 61, which states about the period of warehousing. There are proviso under this. Proviso 1 states that any principal commissioner or commissioner may extend the period for a further period of 1 year. See, until 1 year the goods can be warehoused. In case of clause C, see clause B and clause A, in those two cases the goods can be anyway kept in the warehouse until when they want to keep it. There is no time limit provided. But in case of clause C, there is a time limit of 1 year. That 1 year can be extended for a further period, and that further period cannot exceed 1 year. So 1 year plus 1 year, that 1 year extension can be provided by whom? By a principal commissioner or a commissioner. When the extension can be provided, if there is any sufficient cause, if they find that there is any sufficient cause and for the extension, then they may provide for that extension of 1 year. There is another proviso, proviso 2. It states that if the goods that are deposited, if those goods are considered as a perishable goods, or if the goods are subject to deterioration, if the goods will get deteriorated, then in those cases the period can be a shorter period as well. The authorities can say, see, basically up to 1 year the goods can be kept, but if the goods are perishable in nature, then the authorities may order for a shorter period. They will say, no, you cannot keep it for 1 year, you can keep it only for a certain period which is less than 1 year, and based on that order, until then only the goods can be kept in. This is what proviso 2 says. And let us now discuss about subsection 2. Subsection 2 says, if the goods are falling under the category of clause C. Clause C is what? Any goods, and the time limit is provided up to 1 year only. If those type of goods, then though the period allowed to be warehoused is 1 year, but the goods, once if it is kept for more than 90 days, then interest has to be paid on that. Interest is payable after 90 days, but the goods can be kept for 1 year. I don't know what is the logic here, but at least the act is stating in that way. So let us follow the act. The act says that, see, you keep the goods today, up to 90 days you can defer your duty. See here the what is this? If the goods are warehoused, means there will be a deferment of duty. So the authorities will lose their revenue. So they say that we cannot bear to lose or afford to lose the revenue for more number of days, or we cannot even wait for that 1 year time period until when the goods can be warehoused. We don't want to wait until then. So what we can tell you is, we can wait up to 90 days. If you are not cleared within 90 days, you are allowed to keep in the warehouse, but subject to payment of interest. You will have to pay interest at the rate of 15% per annum from 91st day. This is only for the goods that are falling in clause C. In clause A and clause B, the goods can be kept for any day without even paying the interest as well. Okay, this is what proviso, the subsection 2 says. And there is another proviso under subsection 2. That proviso says that, which we have already discussed before, CBIC is empowered to waive off any part interest or even the whole interest as well for certain category of persons if there is any sufficient cause. If any sufficient reason is provided for not clearing within 90 days, and if the CBIC is satisfied with the reasons provided, then they may issue an order to waive off whole of the interest or any part of the interest. That is provided by the power to the CBIC is provided in terms of proviso under subsection 2 of section 61. Okay, so with this, let us summarize these provisions by way of a flow chart form. I have prepared a flow chart now. So period of warehousing can be considered in case of two category of persons. One is EOU, EHTP or STP. If these are all the persons, they have imported the goods, and those goods can be classified into two categories. One is any input spares or consumables. Second one is any capital goods. Okay, these two types of goods are there. In both the scenarios or both the cases, there will not be any interest at all, and the goods can be kept for any number of days. Okay, there is no time limit as well for period of warehousing. But if it is any other person, if the person is any other person, then the time period is divided into two. One is up to 90 days, second one is more than 90 days. For the period of warehousing, the time period is up to 1 year. That is sure. But that 1 year is divided into two. One is up to 90 days, second one is more than 90 days. Up to 90 days, there is no interest liability. More than 90 days, from the 91st day, interest is payable at the rate of 15%. This is what the provisions relating to warehousing as well as interest on warehousing, period of warehousing as well as interest chargeability. Okay. Okay, let us now discuss about section 64. Section 64 speaks about what are all the rights that are available for the person who has warehoused his goods. These rights are in the perspective of importer. What are all the rights the importer has when the goods are warehoused? If the goods are warehoused, the importer has the following rights. What are all the rights? First one is he has the right to inspect the goods. Whenever he wants to inspect the goods, he can go to the warehouse and he can inspect the goods. Second one is he can deal with the containers to prevent any loss or damage due to destruction. Clear, he can go and he can save the goods, he can put it in some container and he can keep the goods safely to prevent any loss due to damage. That is allowed. Third right he has is he can sort the goods. Sort the goods means like he can just keep the goods in any sequential manner, or he can just change the goods and keep in any other manner. So sorting the goods is also allowed. That is the right provided by the act. Third, next right the importer has is he can show the goods if he intend to sell the goods. So he can get the buyer into the warehouse and he can show, so this is the goods if he is intending to sell the goods. So showing the goods for selling is also allowed. So these are all the rights provided under section 64 of the Customs Act to the importer when the goods are warehoused. Next we will discuss about section 65. Section 65 speaks about manufacture on any other operations on the goods that are allowed. If the goods are warehoused, then manufacturing of goods or any other operations on those goods are also allowed under section 65. These provisions are divided into two categories, or they are seen in two stages, two time periods. One time period is prior to 14th May 2016. I told you one amendment has come in this case, but prior to 14th May 2016, the goods, the manufacturing operations can happen with the sanction of AC or DC. Assistant Commissioner or Deputy Commissioner is empowered to authorize the person to undertake any manufacturing operations inside the warehouse. With effect from 14th May 2016, the power has shifted from AC or DC. It has shifted to Principal Commissioner or Commissioner. The power has been taken to persons of higher rank now. Now only a Principal Commissioner or a Commissioner is empowered to authorize any person to do any manufacturing operations if the goods are warehoused. Inside the warehouse itself, they can conduct the manufacturing operations. So ultimately, what is the remarks here? The remark states that there is an upward delegation. The power is the delegation of powers is elevated here. They have provided it to the upward persons. And any EOU or any EHTP or STP, which we have already discussed, those units should have obtained a license. If those units, they want to do any manufacturing operations inside that, it is not based on the order or any authorization provided by Principal Commissioner or Commissioner. They have to separately take a license for that, and that license can be taken under section 56 or section 65. Under these, any of these two sections, these persons like EOU, EHTP or STP, they will have to obtain a license in order to undertake any manufacturing operations inside the warehouse. Then let us discuss about some other provisions relating to warehousing of the goods. Section 73 capital A of the Customs Act, which is a new section inserted with effect from 14th of May 2016. See, 14th of May 2016 is a very important date where there are major amendments provided by the under the customs law. One of that is insertion of this new section. This section speaks about the warehoused goods shall be under the custody of the licensee of warehouse. Licensee of warehouse means what we can call as the person as a custodian for our discussion purpose. See, I told you that I am a person, I have a warehouse facility with me. I can apply to the customs authorities to provide a permission, or they can provide a license to me to consider my warehouse as a customs warehouse. Once the license is provided by the authorities, then my warehouse can be called as a customs warehouse or bonded warehouse. I told you the license can be provided under section 57 in case of a public warehouse, or 58 in case of a private warehouse. Public warehouse means nothing but any person can deposit into that warehouse. In case of a private warehouse, it means that it is designated only for a particular importer. Only that importer can use that warehousing facility. It can be his own warehouse. That is what the difference between public warehouse and private warehouse. But here the warehoused goods, whatever the goods that are getting warehoused, it will be under the custody of the licensee who have obtained the license. Under his custody, the goods will be deposited. He is only responsible for any damage or any theft of those goods. Okay, here we will call him as a custodian. We will refer that person as a custodian. Until when the goods are under his custody, until the goods are cleared for home consumption, or if the goods are moved from one warehouse to the another warehouse, or if the goods are re-exported, or if the goods are removed from the warehouse for any other purpose. Until any of these things have happened, until then the goods are under the custody of the licensee of the warehouse. Whoever has obtained the license to operate that warehouse, under his custody only the goods will be there. The responsibility of licensee also will be prescribed by the authorities. The moment they provide the license, in the license itself, they will detail, in a detailed manner, they will provide the rights and responsibilities of the licensee or the custodian for our purpose. If warehoused goods are removed in contravention of section 71, section 71 speaks about removing or clearing the goods from the warehouse. If the warehoused goods are cleared in contravention to the provisions of section 71, then the licensee is liable to, here our custodian is liable to pay the duty. And any other action, any legal action, if the authority wants to take some legal action, it will be taken on the custodian. They will be considered as the assessee for our purpose if the goods are removed in contravention to section 71. So it is the responsibility of the custodian to ensure that if the goods are cleared from the warehouse, it has to be properly cleared with the proper approval of the authorities. We have one important point to note here is, because of this section, the duty can be recovered either from custodian or from the importer, and the revenue to the customs is protected here. The revenue which will be coming to the customs authorities, it is ensured because of inserting this new section. See, if the goods are, the duty cannot be recovered from the importer. If the importer has, without the notice to the authorities, if the importer has cleared the goods from the warehouse, then it is slightly difficult for the authorities to trace the importer. In those cases, what they will do is, they will hold the custodian or the licensee of the warehouse to be responsible for the payment of duty. So ultimately, the duty is, the revenue to the authorities, revenue to the customs are protected by inserting this provision. This is a very important section, and this section was inserted with effect from 14th of May 2016. Okay, then we will discuss about a regulation here. Regulation is called as Warehoused Goods Removal Regulations with in the year 2016. This regulation was issued by way of a notification number 67/2016, dated same date 14th May 2016. Okay, very important date. What does this regulation say? The owner of the goods has to make a request. First thing is, the importer, if the goods are warehoused, for clearing the goods from warehouse, he has to first raise a request to the authorities. And what all the following conditions are prescribed by the authorities: where the goods are removed from the customs station, that means the goods are imported from customs station, it is going to be taken to warehouse, or the goods are taken from one warehouse to another warehouse, or if the goods are taken from warehouse to the customs station again for the purpose of export. These are all the three scenarios. In these three scenarios, for transportation of those goods, the following conditions are provided by the authorities. What are the condition? The first condition is there will be a lock, no, there will be a lock done by the authorities. That lock is called as one time lock, OTL. One time lock will be done on the goods. The moment the goods are taken out from the customs station and it is loaded into the vehicle, then the authorities will, they themselves will make a lock. That lock is called as OTL, and on that OTL, that lock, there will be a, that lock will be affixed by the proper officer only, and only principal commissioner or a commissioner is allowed to dispense with such requirement. See, if they want to say that okay, OTL need not be affixed on the particular goods if goods are transported, then in those cases, then these provisions can be dispensed with. Otherwise, affixing this OTL is mandatory when the goods are transported. This OTL will have a serial number, then the proper authorities will have a document of that serial number. Everything will be there, it is protected. It means that the goods are protected. Then there should be an acknowledgement of receipt of goods. See, for example, if the goods are transported from customs station to the warehouse, they have issued an order that the goods can be warehoused. It means for the goods, when it is loaded inside the vehicle, there will be a OTL fixed in that. Because of fixing this OTL, the goods cannot be unnecessarily removed. See, if in the route, generally these warehouses need not be inside the customs station itself. It can be in any other places. So in those cases, when the goods are actually getting transported from the customs station to the warehouse, in order to prevent the goods from the goods being removed or any part of the goods getting removed during the route, in order to prevent that, this OTL is fixed by the authorities. Once the OTL is fixed and the goods are taken out from the customs station, after the goods are received in the warehouse keeper or the custodian of the warehouse, he has to inspect the goods. Then he has to see whether the OTL is not tampered. The OTL, the lock is in proper position and it is not being tampered with. He has to ensure that, and he has to provide an acknowledgement stating that yes, these are all the goods we have received, and that acknowledgement is very important. When the goods are finally getting cleared, that time the importer has to submit that acknowledgement. Okay, this is very important. Even if the goods are, for example, this is one scenario. Second scenario, if the goods are removed from warehouse for the purpose of export, the goods are taken from the warehouse and it is being taken to the customs station, and in customs station it is the goods are going to get export. In those scenario also, the warehouse keeper or the custodian, he has to affix that OTL. There will be a proper officer. Every warehouse will have a designated officer. That officer is called as a bond officer. He is the officer of the customs. He will be operating inside the warehouse. He is called as a bond officer. That bond officer will ensure that he will do the assessment of the goods that are getting exported. For that purpose, it is getting transported from the warehouse. He will do the initial level of assessment. After the assessment is over, he will affix the OTL, and that OTL has to be kept intact till the goods are reached to the customs station for the purpose of export, and he has to get an acknowledgement inside the customs station that the goods are properly taken up. The OTL is not tampered with. All these things are very, very important. These are all some procedural aspects, but these are all very, very important when the goods are actually warehoused. So we will discuss about the provisions relating to OTL, one time lock. So OTL shall be fixed at place of import by the proper officer. When the goods are imported, there the proper officer will affix this OTL, and there will be a number stated on that OTL, the date when the OTL is fixed, the time, everything will be done properly inside the OTL, and the officer will endorse the bill of entry. See, I told you that the bill of entry will be submitted when the goods are taken to warehouse. In those scenarios, the officer will endorse means writing at the back of the bill of entry. In that bill of entry, he will write at the back whatever is the OTL, all those details will be written at the back of the bill of entry. That is called as endorsement of bill of entry. All customs station and warehouses shall maintain the records of OTL. See, if the customs station as well as the warehouse keeper, they will have to maintain the proper records of OTL, whatever the OTL that are getting fixed, number, date, time, everything has to be properly noted by the authorities. If the goods are transferred from one warehouse to another warehouse, in those cases, in case of a public warehouse or a private warehouse, then the custodian of the warehouse allows the transfer of goods from to the another warehouse when the owner produces the permission of bond officer. I told you that a person will be designated or deputed inside the warehouse. Okay, the importer, if he intends to transfer the goods from one bonded warehouse to another bonded warehouse, for any reason he wants to transport it, in those cases he has to first obtain the permission of the bond officer. That permission he has to present it or submit it to the custodian. Only after receiving that permission from the bond officer, he can allow the goods to get removed from his warehouse. Otherwise, I already told you, as per section 73A, he will be held responsible if that is not done properly. The custodian will have to pay the duty on those goods. Okay, this is what in case of public or private warehouse. In case of a special warehouse, I told you that the bond officer will be actually sitting in the warehouse. He will be having the key of that special warehouse, because special warehouse, once the goods are deposited, it will be locked completely and no person is allowed to enter inside until the bond officer is authorizing that person. So the bond officer has to actually authorize the person for removal of goods from this warehouse, and it can be taken to another special warehouse only. The goods which are kept in a special warehouse, it has to be kept in a special warehouse. So if it is removed from one special warehouse, it can be taken to another special warehouse only, and it cannot be taken to any other normal warehouse. Clear? And there is a facility provided by the authorities. The facility is online filing of ex-bond bill of entry. I told you ex-bond bill of entry is when the goods are removed from the warehouse. That time ex-bond bill of entry has to be submitted, which is nothing but green color bill of entry. That bill of entry can be submitted through online, and the system which is called as EDI system. That EDI system is in place for monitoring the warehouse as well. So online process is implemented with effect from 31st May 2015. So from that date, green color bill of entry or ex-bond bill of entry can be filed online as well. Okay, so on receipt of the ex-bond bill of entry, the officer verifies the details through IceGate. IceGate is another system. It is an online system by the customs authorities for the warehousing and etc. So that through that system they can verify the ex-bond bill of entry, which is filed through online mode. Okay, these are all the provisions which is dealing with the procedure when the goods are imported, which is called as import procedures. So let us now quickly discuss about the export procedures. Unlike import procedures, there are no much provisions or much processes in case of exports. So export procedures are comparatively simple. What are all the export procedures? The exporter has to furnish a bond or LUT. Okay, see, I told you that even though when the goods are exported, duty in nature of IGST has to be paid. See, customs duty may have some exemption, or they may get some duty drawback or duty redemption. Many facilities or many benefits are provided to the exporter in case of customs law. But in case of GST, it has to be paid. IGST has to be paid in case of export of goods, because export of goods is considered as a interstate supply under GST law. So when it is an interstate supply, the applicable GST is called as IGST, Integrated Goods and Service Taxes. That has to be paid even in case of export of goods. But in order to prevent, or if they do not want to pay that IGST, even IGST is also is available as refund. See, even IGST also is not applicable in case of export of goods. But if the goods are getting exported, there are two options available to the exporter. One option is they can actually pay the IGST, then they can export the goods. After exporting the goods, they have to get all the proper documents like bill of export, all those documents, clearance by the officer. Although with all those documents, they can apply for a refund of the IGST. That is one route. One is payment of IGST, then after the export have completed, with all those documents they can apply for a refund, and that refund will be paid by the officers, GST authorities. That is one way. Second way is, in order to prevent that, they can have a bond or LUT. LUT is letter of undertaking, that can be entered with the GST authorities. So that bond or LUT, if the exporter has entered into this bond or LUT, then they can export the goods even without paying the IGST part. Okay, so since the exports are considered as zero rated supply, why this IGST has to be paid and it can be refunded, or it need not be paid? All these things is possible because exports are considered as zero rated supply under the GST law. Okay, so the export of the goods, if the goods are exported based under bond or LUT, then the following procedures has to be followed by the exporter. What are all the procedures? One is, the bond or LUT has to be applied for in the form called GST RFD 11. This is the form in which the exporter can apply for a bond or LUT, and this application can be made, it should be made before the export, not after the export. He cannot apply this bond or LUT. Before export he has to apply this bond or LUT, and when the goods are actually exported, he has to submit this bond of LUT if he does not want to pay the IGST upon export. And the details of export invoices are to be reported duly in GSTR1. GSTR1 is the monthly regular return, the return on outward supplies. In that he has to provide the details about export of goods, and whatever he has provided in the GSTR1, it will be confirmed by the customs authorities. In their own portal, they will be confirming that yes, these are all the goods which is mentioned in the GSTR1, it is actually exported. They are also confirming that export. Once that confirmation is provided by the customs authorities, then it means that the goods are properly exported. And if the goods are not actually exported as per the rules, then the bond or LUT, which they have applied for, it shall be stand withdrawn. It means that the bond or LUT is invalid, it will become invalid, and the taxes has to be paid on those exports. And the amount that are withdrawn, it can be restored with the amount due is paid duly. It means what, the bond or LUT, it will get withdrawn if the export is not properly done as per the rules. That withdrawal of that LUT can be restored back if the amount that is due on those export, that is improper export, if the duty is paid on that, then it is considered as restored back. And conditions and safeguard for furnishing the LUT, for furnishing this letter of undertaking, there is a conditions and safeguards are provided, and it shall be prescribed by the CBIC authorities. And the sub rule 1 is applicable only to goods to SEZ as well. See, if the goods are cleared from a domestic tariff area to a SEZ, which is a special economic zone, even in those cases, that is called as a deemed export under GST law. So even in case of deemed export, the persons can have a bond or LUT, and they can clear the goods to the SEZ unit or supply the goods to the SEZ unit without payment of taxes. That is also allowed in case of goods that are supplied to SEZ unit, because those supply is considered as a deemed export under GST law, and it will be considered as a zero rated supply. Okay, there is a circular under these provisions, circular number 8/2017, and it was issued on 4th of October 2017. What does this circular say? The circular states that eligibility to export under LUT. What are all the eligibility? So the following aspects are dealt in by this circular. This is a very major circular under these export procedures. So these are all the elements that are discussed under this circular. What is the element? First one is the eligibility to export under bond or LUT is applicable to everyone. Any person can export goods under bond or LUT, except by the person who have been prosecuted under the CGST or IGST or any other law. If any person is prosecuted under CGST law or IGST law or any other law for the time being in force, then those person cannot execute any bond or LUT. He is refrained from executing any bond or LUT. he has to choose the other option only, like paying the GST, and later he can claim the refund. That is allowed, but he cannot export it without payment of duty under bond or LUT. And this is not for the every person, or not for the every person who are prosecuted. If the person is prosecuted and the amount involved for the prosecution is more than 250 lakhs, clear or not? Any person is getting prosecuted under CGST or IGST or any tax laws, and the amount involved for the prosecution is more than 250 lakhs, then only this he will become ineligible to export under bond or LUT. Otherwise, any person is eligible to export under bond or LUT. What is the validity of this LUT? LUT is valid for the entire financial year. See, for example, if the financial year is starting from 1st of April to 31st of March of every year, that is called as financial year. If the person has applied for LUT on 1st of April, then that LUT is valid until 31st of March of that financial year. If the person has applied for LUT on any day in middle of that financial year, then also the LUT is valid until the expiry of that financial year only. It means that for every financial year, separate LUT has to be applied for. Okay, second one is, if the export is not made within the time limit specified. Once the LUT is applied, there will be a time limit specified for the export of goods or services. If the export is not made within the time limit prescribed, then the LUT which is provided, no, it will be considered as withdrawn. Okay, and if, as I told you, that it will be considered as withdrawn, and the person has to pay the duty on those exports. Once the duty is paid on those exports, then it is considered as restored back. He will get back those LUT eligibility, then he can use that LUT for the subsequent exports. Next is form for bond or LUT. What is the form for applying for this bond or LUT? LUT can be furnished on a letterhead of the registered person in duplicate. LUT can be furnished in the letterhead of the person who is exporter actually, and it shall be executed by a working partner, or it can be executed by a managing director, or it can be executed by any secretary or a proprietor of the business entity. So these are all the persons who are eligible to execute the bond or LUT. And the bond, if required, shall be furnished on a non-judicial stamp paper of a value prescribed by the state. If it is required, it means what? On required basis, if the state prescribes that the bond or LUT has to be executed in a non-judicial stamp paper, then it has to be done in that manner only. Otherwise, what? It can be executed under the letterhead as well. It is nothing but, LUT is nothing but it is the letter of undertaking. It means that a declaration that the registered person is providing to the officer, that in case of any violation, or if found that the export is found to be violated, then the exporter is providing a declaration stating that he will undertake the responsibility for paying the duty. Okay, because of that declaration, the authority is considering that declaration, and they are leaving that the duty need not be paid in case of export of goods. That is just a trust that the customs authorities is having on the registered person. So the trust can come either by issuing the declaration in a letterhead, or it can, the state, a particular state can mandate the person to provide the declaration in a non-judicial stamp paper. That would be more authenticated. That depends on any particular state. Okay, what are all the documents that needs to be submitted for obtaining the LUT? One is self-declaration for conditions of LUT. See, for obtaining this LUT, I told you that there are certain conditions, and the person is providing a declaration for complying with all those conditions. That is a self-declaration. Second one is, the exporter should not be a prosecutor under any law. I told you that if a person is prosecuted under any law and the tax amount is involved is more than 250 lakhs, then he cannot export goods under LUT. And verification can also be done on a post facto basis. Post facto basis means after issuing the LUT also, the authorities may do certain verification. That is also allowed. What is the time limit for accepting the LUT? LUT has to be applied for prior to the export. We already discussed that before undertaking the export, the LUT has to be furnished. And the LUT, once it is applied for, it has to be accepted by the authorities within 3 working days. Clear or not? I have applied LUT today. Within 3 working days, the authorities has to either accept or reject the LUT. If up to 3 working days, if the authorities have not accepted or even they have not rejected, they have not at all come back anything on that, it means that it is deemed to be accepted. Within 3 working days, they can come up with any rejection if at all they want to reject. Otherwise, if they keep quiet up to 3 working days, after 3 working days, it is considered as deemed to be accepted. LUT is deemed to be accepted. Next one is bank guarantee. What is the bank guarantee requirement here? The bond to be executed by person who are prosecuted for cases involving an amount exceeding 250 lakhs. Say, I told you, if the person is prosecuted under any law with an amount involving more than 250 lakhs, then he cannot execute an LUT. But here they say that the bond can be executed by the person who is prosecuted under any law for an amount exceeding 250 lakhs, provided he provides a bank guarantee. Bank guarantee is nothing but it is a document which is obtained from his banker, and the bank is providing a guarantee on behalf of this person, stating that if this person fails to pay the duty, then the bank is guaranteeing for the duty payment. That is called as bank guarantee. That is a simple document. There is no payment involved here. Then those person who are prosecuted under the law, he has to obtain a bank guarantee and provide to the authorities along with LUT. If he does so, then LUT is allowed for him. It is not that completely is ineligible to claim LUT. He is allowed to export under LUT provided he furnishes a bank guarantee. And the bank guarantee has to be furnished for an amount up to 15% of the bond amount. What is bond amount? Bond amount is nothing but, I tell you, see, in the next financial year, I will be exporting up to a value of some 500 crores. This is the value I am projecting that I will be exporting. So that is called as bond amount here. If the person who is prosecuted for more than 250 lakhs, if that person wants to execute an LUT or bond, he has to furnish a bank guarantee. That's what we discussed now. That bank guarantee has to be furnished for a what amount? For an amount up to 15%, that is the minimum of 15% of the bond amount. 500 crores, if he is going to execute a bond, then 15% of that 500 amount he has to provide by way of a bank guarantee. Okay, next one is what are all the purchases from a manufacturer. There was before there was a form called Form CT1, but now there is no provisions relating to issuance of Form CT1, which enables the merchant exporter to purchase from manufacturer without payment of tax under GST law. See, under VAT law there was a form called CT1, but under GST law there is no such form. What is this form? This form is nothing but, see, I am an exporter, I want to purchase, I am purchasing goods from you for the purpose of export. Okay, those goods I am using for export. For purchasing that, those goods, for that I will have to pay GST. That is considered as a transaction and it is considered as a supply. And I purchase goods from the manufacturer and I am exporting it. While exporting those goods, we already told you that because of bond or LUT, I need not pay IGST. But when I purchase the goods from the manufacturer, I cannot provide any form now. Under GST law, I have to pay the GST only. Later point of time, that can be considered claimed as an ITC, and that ITC is eligible for refund. That is totally a different story. But here he will have to upfront pay any GST on the purchases he is making from the manufacturer. There is no exemption to that. But under erstwhile VAT law, there was an exemption by providing a form called CT1. Clear? Next one is transactions with EOUs. EOUs are nothing but export oriented units, which are almost considered as similar to SEZ. SEZ is special economic zone. EOUs are nothing but they are also working like an SEZ only, who are 100% export oriented. They, whatever the purchases they are making, they are going to export only. But here previously the EOUs are considered separately, and even when the goods are supplied to an EOU, that is also considered as a deemed export. But under GST law, Only goods that are supplied to SEZ units that are considered as deemed export, but they have left out these EOUs. So any goods that are supplied to EOUs, that is subject to GST only. There cannot be any exemption for that, or bond or LUT, all those provisions are not at all applicable, because that supply is not considered as zero rated supply under GST law. Are we clear or not? So any supply that is made to a EOU, that is no longer seen at par with supply made to a SEZ unit. But previously under VAT law, it was seen at par. If at all you are supplying to a SEZ unit, or you are supplying to a EOU, both are considered as same. But here they have differentiated both supplies. Now supplies to SEZ unit is considered as zero rated supply, but supply to EOU is not considered as a zero rated supply. Okay, so we'll quickly discuss about the realization requirements under GST law. When the goods are exported, that time after the goods are exported, the export proceeds, that is the value of the goods that are exported, it has to be realized by the exporter. It means what? The amount of goods he is selling, for that he has to receive the money. That is called as realization of export proceeds. Okay, under GST law there is a master circular. Master circular number, not GST law, under RBI has issued a master circular number 14/2015-16. In that financial year they have issued this master circular, and this circular was issued on 1st of July 2015. This circular states that there is no restriction on invoicing of exports for exports in INR. See, for invoicing, if I am an exporter and I am exporting goods, I can invoice for that export. I can raise an invoice for that exports in INR as well. Previously, before this circular, there was a mandate that the invoice has to be mandatorily raised in some foreign currency only. But now this circular states that there is no restriction at all. Even though the exporter is exporting the goods outside India, he can raise an invoice in INR. But as per the FEMA regulations means Foreign Exchange Management Act, there is a separate act for that. So FEMA regulation states that invoices shall be in freely convertible currency or INR. See, I told you this master circular is issued under FEMA only. Under FEMA it says that there is no restriction. You can raise the invoice in foreign currency or even in INR. Whatever the currency you want to use it for raising the invoice, you can use it. But the actual amount of realization, the amount you receive, it should not be in INR. It should be in some freely convertible currency. Freely convertible currency, it is called as FCC. The amount has to be realized in FCC only, but invoice you raise in FCC or in INR. But however, any exports to Nepal or Bhutan or to a SEZ unit also, we have already discussed that it is considered as deemed exports. If the exports are done for these three cases, in those cases the realization can happen in INR. If the exports are done to any other country, then the invoice can be raised in INR or FCC, but the realization of the amount should be in FCC only. But in case if the goods are exported to Nepal, Bhutan, or if the goods are considered as deemed exports because the supply is made to SEZ, then in those cases the realization of amount can happen in INR. Clear or not? The option is provided. But this exemption is only in the case of export of goods. If it is export of services, then there is a separate provision. What is that provision? This provision states, if the export of services to Nepal or Bhutan, here they have missed this SEZ, they have excluded this SEZ. If the export of services is to Nepal or Bhutan, then the realization has to mandatorily happen in FCC only. He cannot realize the amount in INR. But if the export is not export of services, if the export is export of goods, then if the export are done to Nepal and Bhutan, it can be received in FCC or INR. I will make it simple here. Export I am I can divide that into two categories. One is export to Nepal or Bhutan. Second category is export to SEZ unit. Under first category, Nepal or Bhutan, what is the export I am making? That is divided into two. One is export of goods, export of services. In case of export of goods, under Nepal or Bhutan category, export of goods to Nepal or Bhutan, realization amount can be in foreign currency as well as INR, both are allowed. But if it is in the case of export of services to Nepal or Bhutan, then the amount has to be mandatorily realized in FCC only, for freely convertible currency. Okay, only that is allowed, INR is not allowed. Second category, if the export is made to SCC, in those cases I am not going to divide that into export of goods or export of services. In both the scenarios, export of goods or export of services, in both the scenarios, the amount can be realized in INR as well as FCC, both are allowed. So be very clear on that. This is what the rules relating to realization of export proceeds. This conditions are provided by way of issue of a master circular by RBI under FEMA Act. Master circular number is 14/2015-16 and it was issued on 1st of July 2015. Okay, these are all the discussions or provisions relating to procedures in case of export of goods. So we have already completed our discussion on procedures while importing the goods or services, and the procedures that needs to be followed in case of export of goods or services. Import procedures and export procedures, both are completely discussed now. So with this I will conclude my discussion for this video on the concept of provisions relating to Customs Act. And the two parts which we have discussed in this video is import procedures as well as export procedures. We will discuss some other provisions of Customs Act in our another part of the video or in our future video. Okay, so until then, keep watching my channel and keep watching this videos for discussions on various acts and various provisions. Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you for patience watching.